Thank you everyone for coming. Azure DevOps for System Engineers. Uh, my name is Mustafa Toroman. I work as a senior system engineer for a company named Authority Partners. My Twitter handle, my blog post, if I can be of any assistance in the future, feel free to contact me. I've been also Microsoft Azure MVP for last 3 years, and I have a lot of Microsoft certification. Before we start, are we all sys engineers, sysadmin? Are there any developers in the house? Oh, more than system engineers. Okay, so this is this is all the different way around. Anyway, before we start, why DevOps for operations at all? So this is something we've seen often in environments that do not implement DevOps. Devs and ops are in constant conflict and often are blaming each other for their fault. So how many times did you see this? It works on my machine, but once it's deployed to production, it's all the way around. Or when something doesn't work, ops will probably say it's not on the server problem, it's definitely your code. I don't want to even look at the settings in my environment. That's also very common. On the other hand, developers constantly pursue changes. They want to do better things. They want to do new technologies. On the other hand, operations are concerned with stability, security, uptime, SLA, and that sort of thing. So, who's it for? Whose responsibility now? If 6 days after successful deployment, server experiences high load. Ops, yeah, but how can they know it's 6 days after deployment? Everything worked fine for months before. Then we did a new deployment and high workload. Okay, I agree. Ops needs to investigate first, but it's kind of in traditional environments that are not embracing DevOps. It's kind of a struggle to keep these things up. Or software is deployed to test environment. We cannot log into application. Whose responsibility is it now? We did a new deployment on a test environment. Ops handles the environment probably, but they cannot log into application after the latest deployment. Still, there's a bunch of conflicts there. Or there's an issue with build server. Code doesn't build anymore. Whose responsibility is it now? Ops are probably going to have a build server, but it could be also the code. Or it could be server configuration. We don't know that. It's kind of a, and in these situations, constant blaming is present. So when we talk about DevOps, it's basically, if you ask 10 different people what DevOps is, you're probably gonna get a different definition from it. Because it's not some universal process that you can say, okay, this you must do, and this is DevOps. Definition of DevOps is the union of people, processes, products, and to enable continuous delivery of value to your end users. This is a quote by Donovan Brown, who is DevOps principal manager at Microsoft. Person who is responsible for Visual Studio Team Services. Does anyone use Visual Studio Team Services here? Some? Okay, so basically, what it says, it's union of people, processes, and products. You must adjust DevOps process to yourself to enable continuous delivery, and it's all about end users, that they get the best possible care that they can get. So how we became agile and transformed box software into products as a service. That's the DevOps process all about, because previously deployment was very slow process. How many of you deploys once a month? Mostly. How many of you deploys once a week? More. And how many of you deploy multiple times a day? There are some hands. That's cool. That's cool, and that's what DevOps is all about. It's every change you can make, you can just deploy to a production, because on a keynote there was a very good comparison. For example, most of you, does everyone work Agile? Okay, most. So basically, when we work in sprints, we're probably gonna create release at the end of the sprint. But for some little feature, it could be done in a couple of hours. It's probably going to wait till the end of the sprint and be released on at the end of that sprint. So why wait? DevOps is about, once we have it done, let's push it to our client. Let him see a benefit right away after we finish it. So deployment principles are no downtime for a client. It should be fully automated. It should have joint ownership between engineering and operations. Decouple services, clear contracts. Everyone knows what their assignment is, and of course feature flags. So a list of DevOps practices are basically infrastructure as a code, continuous integration, automated testing, so on. The list doesn't stop here. But when we talk about ops, it's more about, basically when we talk about ops, most important thing is infrastructure as a code. That's basically what operations nowadays should very much focus on, because things are very much changed. No one uses GUI anymore, and if you want to be good at your job, you should embrace automation and start scripting your environment. Okay, so what is the DevOps process? You have to plan. During development, you develop and test. Once you release into the production, you monitor and learn. So the process doesn't stop there. So very important part of the process for operations in DevOps process is monitoring, where they can learn what is happening in production and try to make changes that will make your product even better. In release management, we have source repo. One code will be deployed on multiple environments. For example, on dev, on staging, on production. So these environments are probably will not going to match because of the cost. Production environment usually has the best quality. Then goes the staging, and development is the one that you're gonna probably try to save on. So when you deploy your code, it's nice to have infrastructure as a code, so you can build your environment accordingly to what your needs are. So value of this is optimized resources, because we don't create additional cost for our resources. Also accelerated delivery, we have measure of deployment rate, MTTR, and availability. Finally, as I mentioned it, we have option of monitoring what is happening in our production, and that's very important part, including telemetry. So we have all the information, how our application is used, and what are possible issues with it. Also, what is DevOps process is giving us is option to test in production. What we can do is have a production, for example, on the website A, and deploy production B as a new staging slot, then move some portion of our users to production B and try to test it live in production. If we don't see any issues for the smaller part of the users, then we can roll out changes to all our end users. Okay, so let's roll. Let's see how we can do infrastructure as a code, and how can DevOps do much. How can ops do in some things in DevOps process? How many of you uses PowerShell? There are some hands. Cool. Okay, so I have a script here. It's pretty basic script. And what the script does is it creates a new resource. That doesn't. Let's try to. Is it better? Okay. What the script does is creates new resource group in Azure, then creates a new app service plan, new application, web application on that app service plan, and finally it collects a piece of code from Git repo and deploys it to that certain slot. So okay, let's execute this and see what's gonna happen. It will ask me for my authentication. Right. And it should start. Okay, so let's go into the portal. In the meanwhile, this started. Oh, let's close it and try it again. Okay, here we go. Meanwhile, script is executing. I don't know if it even finished. No. So if I go to my resource groups, it already created a resource group in the meanwhile. It created a web app. And let's see if code is already deployed. I was hoping to get there before deployment, but let's see. Okay, so actually it already did deployment as well. We missed that. But script is almost finished. It should just return a message. I wanted actually, okay, let's try. We'll execute the script again. We'll just edit some resources. We'll call resource group. What will we do? We'll create DevOps through new. We'll call resource group as well new. We have web app name, location. Groups should be new as well. Web app name, resource group is again new. And where do we have it? Yes, here. Sorry. Okay, so let's try this again. Yes, I use a Who account. Can you believe it? And here we go. Okay, so let's go back to the resource groups. A new resource group should start. Okay, here's a my new resource group. It's empty right now. It should first start creating a app service plan. Here it is. after a few seconds it should start creating new app as well. Come on, it should be done by now. Okay, here is the app. New app is created. If I open new app, it will be a blank Azure website. This is how blank Azure website looks like when you just create it. And meanwhile, we have a deployment of our Git repo from, it's just a sample from Git repo. It's a Azure samples website, appserviceweb.net get started. This is basically when you create a new ISP.NET project in Visual Studio, what you'll get. But I'm collecting it from Git just to show you how you can deploy directly from PowerShell. Okay, so did it finish deployment already? And here it is. Okay, so from a simple script, I created a new resource group, deployed my app service plan, created a web app, collected my code from repo, and finally deployed it. Now, there's a little problem when you use Azure PowerShell. Some of you raise a hand when I ask the PowerShell. How many of you use Azure PowerShell? Some? Do you have any problems with Azure PowerShell? There's a problem with consistency and updates and undocumented updates with Azure PowerShell recently. It's kind of been an issue. They're working on it. They hired some new guys just to do documentation, so hopefully it will be fixed. In the meanwhile, another thing you can do about infrastructure as a code in Azure are REM templates. Does anyone use REM templates? Some hands? It's good to see that. So basically what we have in REM templates is a JSON file that contains information about your infrastructure. For example, if we go to, there's a huge repo, REM templates Git. There's a huge repo of REM templates on GitHub that you can actually use to get you started. So all kind of different scenarios are already included here. So you can use those scripts to deploy your infrastructure. Or you can play with them and adjust them to fit your needs. Good thing also about REM templates is automation option in Azure. For example, I created this simple resource group, but let's say I could also have a resource group with a bunch of resources, few VMs, couple of databases in there, event hub, all kind of different resources. If I wanted to reproduce that environment again, all I had to do would be go to automation script, and it would generate REM template for me for that specific deployment. So what you can do with this template is you can download it and use it from your computer to deploy. You can add it to library, and you can then later choose it for your deployments, or you can click deploy directly here and start a new deployment right for the portal. So what would this do? If I created, I will just have to create a new resource group, and it will deploy identical set of resources I already created in another resource group. Good example of Git file is, let me see, of a JSON file, sorry. If I go to files, I have Azure deploy. This is a pretty simple script with deploying let me see, a virtual machine. It had parameter for username, for password, for DNS prefix, and it defines which version of operating system we are going to deploy, with some settings regarding nickname, address prefixes, basically network stuff, and here are some other resources also, like a public IP address and virtual network that is going to use, network interface. We also have a size of a disk and so on. what goes, there are some things missing from the script. So if I went to, for example, Azure portal, and there's option template deployment, where I can create and say I want to build my own template, and I can load file. I'll select that Azure deploy, and it will create all those resources for me as well. So on the side, I can see what resources are here. So I have a storage account, public IP address, variable for virtual network name, variable for nickname, variable for virtual machine. If I click here save, it will take me to other screen and require me to enter some additional settings. I can automate those as well with parameter files. So I have one here as well. If I go to file, open Azure deployment parameter JSON, I have parameters that are missing. So if I load this file as well, add parameters, load file, and click open, it will automatically generate all those other information for me as well. All I have to do now is say I want DevOps VM resource group to be created for this particular resource. Click here, agree, and have it purchased. Basically, when you click purchase, you creating new virtual machine that you're going to pay for. Basically, that's the problem with cloud resources. Everything you create, you start paying immediately. So deployment started for my REM template, very simple using of JSON files. While we wait for this to deploy, do we have any questions? No? Okay. In the meanwhile, it's still deploying. Virtual machine usually takes a couple of minutes more than creating web app. That's the difference between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service in general. How many of you uses virtual machines for your work? Quite some hands. And how many are in the cloud right now using any kind of cloud services? That's pretty good. How many of you Azure? AWS? More Azure than AWS? That's the first. I never had a crowd where I have more users using Azure than AWS. That's the first. Okay, so deployment is still in progress. In the meanwhile, we can go to GitHub.
Vilius Kavaliauskas yra kviečiamas atvykti į informacijos centrą esantį pirmame aukšte. Kartoju. Vilius Kavaliauskas esi kviečiamas atvykti į informacijos centrą esantį pirmame aukšte. Dėkoju.
What just happened? Okay. It was interesting. Okay, so basically, if I open any of JSON files, any of the scripts in let's go for the more complex one. At the end, something that has a bunch of resources. Okay, for example, we have a SAP 3-tier market image. Let's do that one. Option I have is visualize. It will take me to Sadcore REM Viz that actually uses JSON file to create a visualization of resources that's going to be created. So this should create a graph of all the resources that will be created and how they are connected to each other. These are not very much connected between each other. Maybe not best example. So let's try another one. Okay, we have I think multiple Mongo. Okay, let's see. Let's see what we have else. Okay, let's do let's do Jenkins, for example. And if I go to visualize, okay, here it is. It's much better picture. It will use JSON file to show you how all the resources are connected to each other, and you can see what are you creating and what what's the connection between those resources. Bad thing is you cannot do it other way around. You cannot create from the graph, create what you need and then reverse it to JSON file. No tool allows us that yet, but let's hope. Another option we have here directly from GitHub is deploy to Azure. So if I click here, it will take me directly to deployment template, and start. I can just click create or edit. I need to enter parameters that are still needed, and just click purchase. So it's a good place to start and quickly start exploring these options. In the meanwhile, my script is still working, but it shouldn't. We have a DevOps VM. Basically, as I can see, all the resources are already created, but the script is not returning information that it's been completed. Okay. So, do we have any questions? Yeah.
So who should create JSON file?
JSON files, from my experience, they should be done by operations. In my experience. Are you operational development? Development, okay. So,
For me it is good answer.
sorry,
For me it is good answer.
yeah, I think operations should create those files. Yeah, I completely, that's my opinion. I met some organizations where it's the other way around, and eventually there's always a problem with the files. It's not that developers don't know how to create those files, but they don't have same mindset as ops. Ops will think more about security, more about networking, how is everything connected to each other. In my experience, developers just care that it works. And what are the issues behind it? I don't care. My code works. So I think, in my opinion, that ops should create those files. Okay, so another place where we can use some skills. Okay, let me go back to Visual Studio. Actually, I have a good example of a project. Open project. Let's say hire. Now back. Where I have an example of a deployment script inside the project itself. So inside the project, I have a Proton hire deploy, where I have JSON files that are created. This is a project is very simple. It's about some microservices. This creates a microservice and deploys it, deploys resources that are needed for it. JSON file basically creates a app service, creates a web app, and then deploys the code to that specific web app that was just created. There's a difference between, you can notice that besides microservice JSON and microservice JSON parameter files, I also have some production test in UAT. Those are, how many of you are web developers? Some? You probably you probably know web transformations and things like that. So this is basically the same thing. Visual Studio has an extension called Cheetah that allows you to create JSON extensions. So what I do here is based on different environments, because for my example, we're talking about a project that has around 50 different microservices. And these microservices are differently deployed in different environments. For example, in production, every microservice will be deployed to different app service plan. For UAT, every 10 services will be deployed to a new app service plan, and for test environment, all microservices are deployed to the same app service plan, just to save some money. So what I can do here as well is create transformation, and based on the build definition, I can say build me this script for this environment, and when I deploy, use that script for that specific environment. So it's also a good way to use JSON. There's a third option for Azure and infrastructure as a code. It's called Azure CLI. Did anyone use it? One. Okay. I'm still waiting to see the future of it, because I used Azure CLI 1.0 a lot when it just came out, and they kind of just killed project, and recently Azure CLI 2.0 came out. I'm just waiting it will stick around, or if they're going to kill it again. So then I'll decide if I should use it or not. Okay, any more questions?